We have Peter Beshar. He is the General Counsel of Marsh McLennan, and we are going to talk about all of the risks that the World Economic Forum folks are focused on. Peter, thank you so much for joining us.
Great. Good afternoon, Julia.
Okay, so we were just talking about the Global Risk Report. It seems that there's a change this year. You have climate finally taking over the top 5 spots. So I got to ask you, what was it that spurred this change?
Sure. Julia, we've been producing the Global Risk Report for the last 15 years, and this has been a shocker for us that we've never had the top 5 risks all relate to one issue of climate change here. So natural disasters and water crises, and also importantly, not just the nature of the risk, but whether or not the world community can organize and get itself so that a coherent response can be made to the risk.
I would imagine it is a sizable risk to a business, an insurance business like a Marsh & McLennan, if we have green swan events. We're starting to hear more about that, especially at this event.
Sure. You just look at the wildfires down in Australia. The fires in California alone in the last 2 years have produced $30 billion of damage. The sum total of all fires for the last 30 years in California. So you just get a sense of the intensification of the threat.
When we talk about risks, what can we do to mitigate some of these? Because they sound really dire when you see your report. It is a really dire situation.
And Julia, that's one of the main things here in Davos this week is converting good words and good intentions into really concrete deeds at scale. And I think the corporate community is feeling the heat, quite frankly, both here in Davos and elsewhere. They're feeling it from Greta Thunberg, the activist that you mentioned, who spoke earlier today, from their employees, and in many ways from their own children, to just demonstrate that there's a way of responding in concrete steps that can really start addressing the threat.
I guess I was going to say, my follow-on to that, though, is of young people driving change. Does that change the future of work for companies? Because you're talking about the next generation of talent, the next generation of voters, the next generation of investors.
Sure. Think about some of the companies that have just made extraordinary leaps forward. Beyond Meat, a wonderful product for the millennials, hell of a stock, and doing an important role in combating climate change. Tesla's been another example of just really disrupting their industry. And then there are other companies like Microsoft that made a pledge not just to go carbon neutral, but to actually go carbon negative by 2030. And I think those are the types of actions that are really necessary.
As a business leader, are you more optimistic about the economy this year or less after hearing President Trump's speech?
I think what was striking about President Trump is just his presence here, first of all. He considers himself a unilateralist, and in many ways this is the quintessential multilateral, multi-stakeholder event. So it's quite fascinating that he chooses to come here, as he's done now twice out of the 3 years in his administration. And as you mentioned, I thought the speech was as much of a campaign-style event to a U.S. audience about the economic strides that have been made in the country.
Do you think the economy is as strong as President Trump suggested?
The business community, and we're in the risk business, Brian, so we probably see a little bit more questions on the horizon about will the global economy really gather steam. It's been fairly subdued over the past several years.
Well, beyond the risk as they relate to climate change, what else is on your radar from a risk standpoint when it comes to, corporations?
Sure. For the business community, the other big risk in the Global Risk Report was really cyber attacks against the control systems of critical infrastructure. And so what we've seen in the past are really thefts of data in the form of data being stolen, your social security numbers, your credit card numbers, or data being held hostage in the form of ransomware. But really the emerging threat, and what experts are particularly concerned about, is the idea that you can manipulate the controls of nuclear facilities, chemical plants, telecommunications networks, and that could morph from the digital realm really into the physical realm, so that you went from the loss of life, the loss of data, to the loss of life.
Sounds like the worst case scenario.
Do these factors keep you up at night? You are in the risk business.
We are indeed. And there's elements of progress, obviously. If you think, Brian, of something like artificial intelligence and quantum computing, are those developments more likely to help those of us who are trying to defend networks or those who are trying to attack networks? And something like AI has an element of both. So it will enable companies like ours to detect anomalous behavior that warrants further investigation. But at the same time, as the NSA's announcement this past week demonstrated, that they had identified a flaw in the software, Windows 10, that underpins some 900 million desktops. And so if nation states or hackers can use AI to find and then exploit those vulnerabilities, that poses a significant threat for the business community.
And Peter, I do want to talk about the World Economic Forum and your experience coming to Davos. It's the 50th anniversary. Just for our viewers who might not be familiar, walk us through, kind of the benefit of coming. What do you get out of it? Is it the sessions? Is it the interactions that you have in the hallways? Tell us more about it.
On so many fronts, Julia. First of all, I'm in awe of Klaus Schwab and the idea that he conceived and founded this organization 50 years ago at the age of 31. For me, it's two things, really. The combination of who the stakeholders are, so they're government leaders, they're nonprofit leaders, and they're business executives. And then you spend a fair bit of time talking on areas like risk, which is our specialty, and at the same time you talk about things and learn about things that have nothing to do with what you do. So immunotherapy or just so many other of the rapid advances in technology and science that are far outside anything I spend my day on.
Well, we hope you download the Yahoo Finance app and watch some Beyond Meat's share prices on that app.
I absolutely will.
All right, Peter Beshar, General Counsel at Marsh McLennan. Good to see you. Thank you.
Many thanks.
Thank you.